Hello and welcome to Blackboard 9.1 at Bellevue University. This video is going to provide a brief overview of the main changes between Blackboard version 8 and Blackboard version 9, specifically how it pertains to Bellevue courses. It's going to be a similar material to the content covered in the 9.1 Survival Basics training that was delivered both in person and via Skype. To begin, you're viewing the screen of the Blackboard welcome screen for Bellevue University, and as you can see, there's some cosmetic differences regarding color and banner, but the overall structure is the same. And you're going to find that's true for this home screen and also for your courses. And let's go ahead and take a look at a sample course now. As you can see when you log into a course, the overall structure of that course is the same. You've still got the tabs across the top, you've still got the buttons here on the side, and the basic course content in the middle of the course. And the fact is, for your students, when they log into Blackboard, they're going to see very few structural differences. They're going to have a very similar experience in Blackboard version 9 as they did in Blackboard version 8. However, there is one main difference for faculty, and that has to do with the control panel. The fact is, in Blackboard version 9, the control panel does not exist as a separate screen in the way it did in version 8. In my early version 8 training, I used to use the metaphor of an old-fashioned chalkboard as a way to explain the control panel to new Blackboard users. If you imagine one of those old-fashioned chalkboards, you have to flip the chalkboard over to get to the back side, and you could think of that back side as the control panel, while the front side was the main screen for the course. Well, what they've done in Blackboard version 9 is they've switched that functionality so that instead of flipping over the old-timey chalkboard, you have one of those new touchscreen smart boards in which the control panel content is actually embedded into the course rather than existing as a separate screen. And so that's what we're going to look at in this video, is the ways in which the control panel functionality is integrated into the course as a whole so that you don't have a separate control panel screen. Here on the course, you can see that I'm looking at the control panel area. Now, this still does exist in the course. In the similar position to where you used to have the Access Control Panel link, you now have this Course Management Control Panel area. What you'll notice when I click on various items in this control panel area is that rather than being taken to a separate screen, it often brings up a little menu here that gives me some options of things I can do within that control panel. So each of these little option windows is going to represent one of those modules that used to exist on the old control panel screen. But all of that functionality is located here in the course. Now, the first way that content was embedded into the course has to do with this edit mode on-off link that you can see in the upper right-hand corner. If you remember from Blackboard version 8, this is in the same location that the Edit View Display View link was located in Blackboard version 8. If you'll remember, in the assignments area and the course documents area, you used to be able to switch from Edit View to Display View by clicking on a link in this upper right-hand corner. Well, now that functionality has been expanded to every area of the course. You'll notice we're on the announcement screen, which didn't used to have the Edit View Display View link, but I still do have the option to turn edit mode on or off. Now, by default for a faculty member, when you go into a course, edit mode is going to be on, which is what we're looking at now. But I can turn edit mode off by simply clicking the toggle switch. And now we're taking a look at the announcements area with edit mode turned off. This is the view that your students are going to see for your course. So it's a very simple matter if you want to switch from instructor view to student view for any area in the course. Here we'll switch to assignments and look at the same thing. If I turn edit mode on by sliding over the toggle switch, now I'm looking at something in which I can make changes. This is the same effect that you used to have in Blackboard version 8 by going to the control panel and clicking on the assignments area and entering it that way. It's the same result, okay? And so the only place you can get there now is by using this edit mode on or off toggle switch in the upper right-hand corner. Now, you'll notice when I switch from edit mode on to edit mode off and back, there's some little buttons and icons and symbols that appear when edit mode is on. And we're going to talk about those because they represent some functionality that carries over throughout the entire Blackboard course. And if you can understand these basic symbols and this basic functionality, you're going to be able to perform all of the tasks that you performed in version 8 within version 9. The first little element that we're going to look at is this button that you'll see appear here. It appears here. It's this little button that has the 2 downward pointing arrows, and you're going to see this all over in Blackboard version 9. You might recognize this from the Grade Center in Blackboard version 8, where the little chevron button that appears at the top of the column headings or within each individual cell in the Grade Center, you can click on that to bring up a pop-up menu of options that shows you things you can do for that cell or that column heading. Well, that's the exact functionality that this button has, and only now it's all over the course in Blackboard version 9. I refer to it as the options button because what it does is it brings up a list of options of things that you can do for the item where the button is located. For example, here on this library resource link, I click on the options button, and now I see that I can either edit it, I can mess with the adaptive release, I can copy it, I can move it, or delete it. And that menu was brought up by clicking this little options button. What this has replaced is that there used to be some buttons here beside items that would be, say, modify and copy and remove, and manage, and all of that functionality has now been replaced by what pops up in the options menu. The same thing happens here for the buttons. If I want to change, let's say, the visibility of the buttons or the name of the buttons, all those things appear as an option when I click on the options button. So when you see the double down arrow, just know that it brings up a set of options of things you can do with that item. Now there's several variations of this button that also appear in the course, so we're going to talk about those. The first variation we're going to talk about is where the arrows are pointing upwards. You're only going to see this in a few places, but what it does is it contracts or minimizes a menu or an area. For example, you have one here in the course menu for the course. And you can see when I leave my mouse on it, it says it's going to collapse the menu. And that's exactly what it does. When I click on this upward pointing arrow, what it's going to do is it's going to collapse the menu. That's what the upward pointing arrow does. Here, if I want to collapse this Grade Center area, I do so by clicking the upward pointing arrows. I can even collapse the entire control panel area by clicking on that button. You'll notice now that the upward pointing arrows have turned to downward pointing arrows, and I can expand the menu just as easily as I collapsed it by clicking on the downward pointing arrows. One thing that it's important to note is that students have access to this particular upward pointing arrow. They do have the functionality to collapse that menu, so you might get a question from students wondering where the buttons have gone. The first thing I would recommend asking them is if you can re-expand the menu by clicking on the downward pointing arrow. Another variation to the upward and downward pointing arrow buttons is going to be a sideways pointing arrow. This is also pretty rare in the course, but it does exist. For example, here in the control panel area, if I click on the sideways pointing arrow next to evaluation, what it's going to do is it's going to bring up that evaluation area in the center part of my screen. You can think about the sideways pointing arrows as arrows that move content from one area into another. One other example of the sideways pointing arrow is right here, and I want to point this out. It's kind of a singular button. It's the only thing in the course that works like this, but if I leave the mouse on it, it says this is going to hide the course menu. And that's exactly what it does. Both students and faculty have the option to hide the buttons or reveal them by using this singular sideways arrow. Now I point this out because it's easy to get lost in an area once you have minimized the button menu. I mean, assignments, for example, if I hide the course menu and then scroll to the bottom, you'll notice that that button doesn't scroll with me. So if you get to the bottom of a course and you've lost the course menu and you can't remember where it's gone, all you need to do is scroll to the top, re-click the sideways button, and there you get your menu back. This is also functionality that students have access to. So again, it's something that you might get as a question from students as to why they can't see the buttons in their course. It's probably because they've either minimized the menu here or they've used the sideways hide course menu button to shift the center frame into that left-hand area. So those are all the functionality of the options button. You've either got it pointing downwards, which is going to allow you to bring a pop-up menu of options up. It's going to be pointing up, which is going to give you the functionality of minimizing something, or it's going to be pointing sideways, which is going to allow you to move something over from one side to the other. The second little functionality iconography that we're going to talk about is another one that appears in the Grade Center, but it's what I call the draggable indicator, and it's this little arrow that has arrowheads at the top and the bottom. You'll notice when I put my mouse into that draggable indicator area, my mouse also turns into a multi-headed arrow. You might recognize this functionality from the Organize Your Grade Center screen in the version 8 Grade Center. When you were in that screen, you could drag your columns into any order you wanted. Well, that functionality now, just like the options button, has been expanded to the entire Blackboard course. And so now, by putting my mouse into the draggable indicator area, I can click and drag items into any order that I want. This replaces the little drop-down menu ordering functionality where you could select to make something first, second, third, fourth, etc. in a course. Now you just simply have to drag them into the order that you want. This is particularly helpful on the announcement screen. If you remember in Blackboard version 8, in order to get announcements into the order that you wanted them, you had to do a lot of finagling. You had to mess with dates, you had to mess with whether or not it was a permanent announcement. There was a lot of sort of beat the system work that had to be done. Now in version 9, all you have to do is simply drag announcements into a new order and they will appear in that order for your students. So that's a real nice improvement in the ordering functionality. The variation that exists on this is in a few places in your course, and it's this little gray box. And what this little gray box is going to allow you to do is it brings up a reorder screen, and this reorder screen allows you to move these things into a different order just like you would do by dragging, but it allows you to do it from one location. Where this might be helpful is if you're wanting to take something from the bottom of a list to the top. Dragging and scrolling can be kind of cumbersome, so if I want to take the very bottom announcement and move it to the top, I'll probably click on the reorder menu, click on the item, use this little arrow to move the item up, and hit submit, and now that new announcement will appear above the line in the announcements area. So that's the reorder screen, and everything else that has these draggable indicators is going to allow you to drag items into a new order. This concludes our first video on basic 9.1 functionality. We've talked about the edit mode toggle switch, we've talked about the options button, and we've talked about the draggable indicators. We've also talked about the fact that the control panel no longer exists as a separate screen in your course, but it exists as this expandable, collapsible menu that's then integrated into the course itself. If you've got a good handle on that functionality, you're probably going to not have any trouble maneuvering through, navigating through, and editing your course. But I wish you the best of luck, and stay tuned for our next video on the Blackboard 9.1 upgrade at Bellevue University.